And that's what I did. And then it slowly and gradually grew up until like 2016. I only had one employee. And then in the years after that, 2017, 2018, and then throughout the pandemic, we've grown to a team of 9 now. And especially during the pandemic, the label grew exponentially because people were sitting at home, not being able to go to gigs or festivals, not even being able to spend their money on drinks and going to bars. And they still loved music, and so they wanted to buy vinyl records. And we increased our production by like 800% through the pandemic. It's crazy.
Hey, what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians, talk all about their lives and music while sharing a craft beer. I hope you've been having a killer 2023 so far. I most certainly have been. This Vox and Hops episode is presented by Heavy Montreal. Heavy Montreal are Montreal's premier metal promoter, and I am very, very stoked to have them behind the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I would just like to ask you to follow the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast on the podcast platform of your choice. But more than that, I would love for you to tell a friend about the podcast. If there's someone in your life that just loves post-metal, well, you should let them know that the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast exists. You can tell them that there are over 380 episodes where I hang out with killer metal musicians and we talk all about their life and music while sharing craft beer. If you would encourage one of your post-metal loving friends to become a brand new Vox and Hops head, that would be something that I would truly appreciate. Now, today on the podcast, I'm very stoked to be with Robin Staps of The Ocean and Pelagic Records. Get ready, everyone. This is Vox and Hops episode number 386.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Today I'm with Robin Staps of The Ocean Collective, head of Pelagic Records. Robin, how you doing?
Very well. Arrived in Canada yesterday, and it feels like we're finally arrived on this tour after some initial trouble, so we're happy to be here.
We are very happy to have you here. I'm very happy to be face-to-face with you. Let's just dig into the thick of it. How did you cope with the glorious years, plural, of 2020, 2021, half of 2022, hopefully not the rest of 2022 because it's just about over. By the time this comes out, it will be over, and hopefully none of 2023.
Well, we've coped very well with 2022 so far. It's been an amazing year and fully back at it, basically, after the downtime, so that feels really good. We've just been out on a 6 weeks headline tour before this one in Europe. With
amazing. Yes, with my boys, LLNN.
Whom you know very well, yes. I believe. You sang on their last record.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we took those crazy Danes out for 6 weeks, and it's been a very fun run. And now we're here for a tour with Catatonia and Stella Darling. And like I said, it feels great to be able to do this again finally because, when COVID struck in 2020, for the first half of the year or so, I think it was actually a pretty good time because we toured so much in 2019. We started the year in India and Australia and New Zealand.
Amazing.
Then we did a European tour. Then we did a very lengthy tour through Russia, all the way from west to east to Vladivostok, including Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Georgia, all countries we had never been to before.
Amazing.
And then Japan, and then we did this tour with Leprous in Europe to end the year. So we've basically been out for like 6 months of the year. So when COVID struck, we were all very happy to be home for a while, just hang out with our girlfriends and our dogs, and not do anything. So yeah, it was a good creative and productive year. I wrote 2 new records during COVID, basically. But by the end of 2020, it was getting very boring and sad and just, it was just too much, basically. And then to cope with it and do something, we did these 2 live streams in 2021. So one was actually like a fully live stream concert from a massive empty venue in Bremen in the north of Germany, which was weird. It was like a 4,000 or 5,000 capacity hall with no people in it, but we knew people were watching. We sold like 1,500 tickets for it, so it was this very odd feeling that we've never had before of playing to a very big crowd that is ours, but not seeing that crowd in the room. So it was just It was very weird, but it was cool in a way. And most importantly, it gave us a reason to get together in the middle of lockdown and do something, while basically most bands weren't really doing anything except these streams. So it was good. We rehearsed for a month. We got together to play music, got all together into a room to play music and just hang out. And we had all not seen each other for a year or so. So that was pretty cool. And then we did the second part of Phanerozoic for Roadburn, the digital version of Roadburn that year. So that kind of like gave us some glimmer of hope in the middle of total nothingness and made us carry on through, basically. And then in the summer of 2021, we did already some open-air festivals again in Europe. Some of them were very odd. Resurrection Fest, which we've played many times, always great in the northeast of Spain.
Absolutely,
was like a seated scenario, so there were like tables and small groups of people sitting on tables. So that sucked, honestly. It was just like not really enjoyable. And then we did a festival in the south of Spain that was like a normal open air festival with no restrictions, oddly enough, in the same country. So that was cool. And and then in the fall we did a couple of indoor festivals already. We did a Pelagic Fest in Antwerp, which was great. It was the first show in the big room at Trix, sold out, and that was the first time seeing a lot of people closely together in a room listening to live music, and it felt like being reborn, really, for us as much as for the crowd. It was a beautiful evening.
The return.
And then we went back into lockdown, and until we toured the US in early 2022 with Leprous. So between those shows in the end of 2021 and early 2022, it was this dark period of nothing again. But we saw light at the end of the tunnel because we knew we had that US tour coming up. And that was this year already, a couple months ago. And it was very bizarre for us because at that time in Europe, nothing was happening. And we arrived on the plane and had a show the next day, and it was a packed room. And it was as if the pandemic had never happened, and we were like, fuck. And in Europe, everyone at that time was just super beat up, from just not having any options of doing anything but going to small bars that were open in Berlin since early 2022. So playing a packed concert room was like really something we didn't expect, to be honest. And it was great for us also because we were literally one of the first international tours going out here, I think. And so we started as early as we could get back at it. We did. And now we're here.
Amazing. And that is true. I remember when that show came through Montreal, the Leprous, the Ocean tour, I was not ready. Like mentally to like balance my digital interviews, my Zoom interviews, and then face to face. And then I was like, oh shit, they're coming. And then it was 3 weeks ago. I totally missed it.
I think a lot of people felt like that. You had to remind them that, yes, you can go to gigs again, like after 3 years of not doing that. I had a lot of friends that I used to go to gigs with that were just not coming out anymore. And I kept having to nudge them like, hey, there's this thing, like, remember?
You love this.
It was actually cool, yes.
You really do.
And then they're like, oh, yeah, actually, yes.
Vox and Hops is all about hanging with my metal friends, talking about their lives and music while sharing a craft beer. We are downtown Montreal right now at Lola Rosa, which is a place that I come frequently with my wife, Jessica. It's a killer vegan restaurant, but we came here specifically because I knew that they had this beer, which is Boréale du Nord-Est. It is one of the beers that changed the beer scene here in Quebec, creating the hazy IPA craze. Massive shout out to Gabriel Dulon, their brewer, Vox and Hops alumni. He made this in his garage, and it worked. And he had to convince Boréale, which is a massive macro brewery at this point, to try to do something like this, and it worked, and it changed the entire scene. So cheers to you for hanging out with me and enjoying a brew. It's always stable, it's juicy, it's creamy, mildly bitter, just totally enjoyable, always amazing. Let's dance into beer. Do you remember your very first beer?
It must have been something very terrible, like an average German shit beer like Jever or Beck's, probably something like that, when I was 12 or 13 years old. I got very heavily into drinking very quickly at that age, and then went straight edge when I was 15. And I was not drinking at all for 5 years, which really helped me in many ways say no to things that I should say no to. But then I also realized that beer is a good thing, and there's no reason to categorically reject anything like that, you know. So I started drinking again. But yeah, my first beer was like that typical teenage bullshit.
I do remember something about like drinking games.
Oh yeah,
with vodka.
Yes,
which is another reason why you pushed yourselves towards the straight edgeness.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. We were playing these drinking games called Mayan in German, which is basically like a drinking game with dice, very simple and very stupid. Every weekend, there's always a friend who didn't have his parents in the house, where we would gather and play these drinking games and drink ridiculous amounts of vodka and ouzo, a Greek aniseed-based liquor.
So I got goosebumps just thinking about it.
It gives me the shivers.
I know, I just got them.
Yeah, that smell of aniseed and alcohol gives me the shivers because I puked so many times after that, like when I was 14. So yeah,
brutal.
Yeah, so that all got to a point where it was just not very sustainable already, and then hardcore happened, and that was a great thing for me. Took me out of that.
So you got totally into the scene of straight edgeness. You could take a sip. Don't worry, go for it. I won't keep you talking the whole time. Totally immersed into the scene of hardcore straight edgeness. At what point did it come to a point when you tried that first beer after that you broke away from that and found your own identity of what your identity is going to be, basically?
Yeah. Well, that was about 5 years later down the line when I was like 19, 20. And I was becoming very frustrated by the elitism in the straight edge scene and just like hanging out or constantly seeing people who felt like they're better than others just because of personal choices they made. And for me, it was always a personal choice to be straight edge at that time. And I hated that. And I didn't associate myself with these people anymore. And it kind of ruined the idealism for me in a way that I all of a sudden felt that I don't want to be affiliated with these types of people. So that was probably the trigger, but also I realized that I don't need dogmas in my life. There is a healthy, very healthy thing called sanity and Vernunft in German that allows us to judge situations and to take the right decisions in every situation individually without clinging to a certain dogma or a stereotype. And I just felt like I had grown out of that somehow. And I never really enjoyed drinking. Like when I was 13, 14, I was a kid, you know, so it was just something that we did. I don't know, like it was, I don't even remember much of it, but it was not for the pleasure of enjoying like a nice IPA, for example. You know, I just simply didn't know that. And I tried it at that time, and I started really liking it to a point where I don't have to get drunk every weekend and where I wasn't playing drinking games anymore, but we were simply choosing myself when I would like to drink and what I would like to drink and how much. And being straight edge learned me to be in full control of that. And that's what I take out of it and what I still take out of it. I don't think I've puked since my 14th birthday ever after alcohol. And I can get very drunk, but I know exactly the point when I need to stop in order to feel all right about it the next day, you know, without suffering the most dire consequences, which I sometimes do, but then I consciously take that step, you know. So
it's a decision that you've made.
Yeah.
Well, that's very good that you went through that early on in your life, and because so many things can go wrong if you don't have that knowing how to draw the line.
Yeah.
And a lot of people discover that too late in life, and they don't have the capacity to stop at that point.
Sure, yeah. It's also a matter of personality to some degree, I think. But yeah, growing up in a small village, drinking was happening everywhere. I was the only kid at my school that was not drinking.
Really?
I was also the only kid for a long time that was into hardcore. So I had a hard time seeing shows because in my town there was nothing going on. So I always had to team up with older people from other places to get to gigs. So
you hop into a car with them, basically?
Exactly.
And your parents were cool with that?
They were cool with that. They eventually, I mean, my dad very early realized that this whole hardcore thing is something very positive because it kept me away from bad stuff. So they were very supportive, but I still had to make arrangements and, you know, find someone to drive. And we were going to shows in places that were like 45 minutes away just because I grew up in a shithole where there was really nothing happening. And yeah, so I was the oddball for many years, but that again was very healthy and just strengthened my personality and how I was looking at things and values, basically independently from what other people around me were doing and thinking.
Absolutely, and we still are the oddballs, which is what's amazing.
We are,
about
exactly.
being a musician, an artist, someone creative. Classic Vox and Hops question. I'd love to hear about the soundtrack of your youth. When you were growing up in your parents' or guardians' house, what music was playing? When you were not in control of the radio, what music did your parents or guardians listen to?
My parents were not listening to much music at all, which is strange because my dad is actually a musician. He's a very talented autodidactic piano player.
Really?
He doesn't know how to read music, but he
hears
plays
it
he
and
hears
can
it and
play
he
it.
plays it. So he's virtuous in that way, really. And he taught me to play the piano at a very early age, very basics. But I also soon lost interest in that and discovered the guitar. And that was not really something that I did through my dad, because he was just playing the piano, and he was playing every day, but he wasn't really playing many records. If he was, it was stuff like Pink Floyd, which I believe was the last band he consciously followed and loved.
Okay.
And then he just got to this point that a lot of my friends are getting to as well when they're over 30, where they just don't listen to new stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Because it requires an effort to find out about cool new stuff. And at one point, people just get lost in their bubble and only listen to what they listened to in the 90s, and I think with my dad it was a similar case. So it was like old rock stuff that he was listening to sometimes, and my mom is not a musical person at all. She's basically not listening to much music, so the music playing in our house was very soon defined by me. And
you would take over the record player.
I had a CD player in the early 90s, in the late 80s. I was born in 79, so one of the first records I picked up were like Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, Use Your Illusion 1. I saw them live in 1991 with Faith No More and Soundgarden. That was a game changer, that gig. And so that was like my earliest contact with rock, basically. But even before that, my first gig ever was Bryan Adams, a fucking Canadian. So I should mention that here proudly.
Yes, I do have that written right there.
That was
Shows/Canadian.
Exactly. Yeah.
What was that like? Well, why Bryan Adams? How does that work?
That was even before Guns N' Roses, obviously. I don't even know how I discovered that, but he had a big hit back then.
Huge.
Might have been through... Didn't he do that song for the Robin Hood soundtrack?
He did.
It was probably something like that.
Everything I do.
So I ended up begging my dad to take me to a gig, and he took me to a gig. I must have been like 7-8 years old, something like that. And it was a big open air gig in Hannover.
Amazing.
And we were standing near the front of house, and then all of a sudden for the encore, he appeared on like a little stage next to the front of house,
cool.
and all of a sudden I was front row, and I caught a drumstick, and that was the beginning of the end of my life, basically.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So after that gig, you go home. Had you already started like playing guitar at that point?
No, that was later.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was really my first concert experience, and
Yeah.
that made me be more interested in music. And then I discovered Guns N' Roses and got super into it to the point where I knew all the lyrics by heart, and I was dressing up like Axl Rose. I got the bandana and shit. And
Fucking right.
yeah, that was when I was like 10, 11, probably, something like that.
So when did the guitar enter your life?
And the guitar entered a little bit later, when I was maybe like 13, 14.
And what
at
was
that
the
time,
influence there?
At that time, I was listening to Helmet. I was listening to the... like it was the time of the Judgment Night sampler that
Hell
came out.
yes.
This odd
So good.
moment in time when metal and rap like kind of touched each other without
good.
it being embarrassing.
Yeah.
Which is hard to believe for those who are listening now and who don't know that sampler.
That
but
was,
it was
well done, yeah.
a whole like cool collaborations between hip hop artists and metal artists. Like Slayer did a track with Ice-T, and
Yeah.
Helmet with House of Pain and
Yeah.
things like that. And that was that I really loved. And
Very much me too.
and then Prong and Helmet, and then I got into like New York hardcore through Sick of It All. It was my first hardcore show that I saw in 1993, I think. 94.
From that Bryan Adams
Yes.
to the Sick of It All. That's quite a different experience for a youth to be at.
It was indeed, and there was something about it that I liked, but I couldn't for a long time make out what it was. It was aggressive, it was unlistenable for me at first, but something made me keep going back to it and listen to it again. And I enjoyed the smart political lyrics that I appreciated that back then already. To have like a positive message embedded into a context of heavy music. That was always something that I found interesting. And later with the whole vegan straight edge thing and bands like Earth Crisis, when I was like 15, 16, that was the same thing. Bands playing super heavy music, singing about animal liberation. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I love that, So, yeah, Sick of It All was my entrance to that. Strife were supporting in California. And that was the first straight edge band I saw live, and after that gig I was sold. Just the raw energy, and at the same time, like I said, combined with that positive message, that really got me going. And then I got big time into 90s hardcore. Discovered more abrasive stuff as well. Bands like Unbroken, Groundwork, and then Converge at that time. They released Petitioning the Empty Sky, I think in 94, must have been around that time. I bought that record, and that was, again, like a total life changer for me. It was so much ahead of its time in many ways. And so that's how it all started, basically.
It's amazing. How about your first time on stage? We hit the Bryan Adams first, your experience at a show. You're on stage now, you got a guitar in your hand, or was it even like a piano recital before that?
No, there was nothing before that. I always had stage fright, if you want to call it like that. When I was a kid, I didn't like to perform or do karaoke or things like that. It was not my thing at all. I'm definitely not a born performer. I had to overcome myself to be okay with that scenario. And now I enjoy the adrenaline, the rush of adrenaline. There's also always a bit of a moment of terror that something can just go horribly wrong, more like technically wrong. We've had these moments with the ocean, plenty of embarrassing moments. But
stuff outside of your control.
Exactly. The computer rebooting and the Windows logo coming up on the projection screen behind you while you're playing, things like that.
You can laugh about it now, but in the moment it fucking sucks.
Exactly, it does. Yeah. So my first gig was we started basically covering songs of hardcore bands we liked, but that was without any gigs. We were just in the rehearsal room playing, and then I played in a band in 97, 98. I must have been like 16, 17, called Clandestine, named after that Entombed record. And that was also like heavy, noisy, abrasive hardcore. We played a couple shows with Catharsis, a band from the States that we all worshipped at that time, and Gehenna, if you remember that band.
No, that one I don't remember.
Sick, violent as fuck. I remember the singer carving through the crowd with his head first and just
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, death and destruction. So yeah, those were my first shows.
I love that. I think it's amazing. Something that happened recently, since the last time we had a conversation, you finally get back on the road. You finally get back over to the States. You're finally allowed to play. And Loic jumps into the crowd and breaks both his feet. Exactly what you just said right there about loving this singer jumping off stage with his head and carving his way throughout the crowd. Is there a moment when, as a band, you have to make a decision that maybe we're too old to do certain things on stage?
I believe so. I think this is probably why Dillinger quit in the best moment, and I have a lot of respect for that. rather than just aging and not being able to do the things anymore that you used to do and that were very essential for
100%.
the band that you were on stage.
Yeah.
It's better to quit doing that at one point, or
yeah.
maybe to quit the band altogether. So yes, absolutely. I do think, however, that there's also a kind of dignified way of growing up and changing what you do on stage and how
Absolutely.
you perform, and also ideally coinciding with the type of music that you're writing. So, I mean, we were never in that situation, really. Like, I mean, we're not Dillinger's Caplan, obviously. We do have a lot of very energetic aspects of our performance. Loic does go into the crowd a lot, like at almost every show.
Still to this day, he still does
and
it.
it's to this day he still does that.
Wow.
It's a little bit different here on this tour because we're supporting, and it's a bit of a different crowd.
Absolutely.
But when we're headlining, every night he's out there, and the fact that he broke both of his legs didn't stop him. Like, not at all.
Really?
He was actually.
There's never like a conversation afterwards, like, look, dude, we're finally back on the road, and then this. No,
He loves to do that. It's nothing that he does intentionally. It's just like when there is that energy, that's what he does. There's footage of him stage diving with like broken legs and like the mold still on from Barcelona, you know. And when I saw that from stage, I was like, dude, fuck, don't.
Let me get my phone. But
Yeah, exactly.
But there's like him, and then there was Bill from Decrepit Birth, same situation, and then Bill had to drop off the tour, but you guys continued without a vocalist, I think, because you guys are so much melodic and progressive. I think you can sort of do it, but it must have been a weird tour.
It was a very weird
not
tour.
having a vocalist.
No, it was really hard for us. I mean, the tour was amazing up until this point.
Yeah.
It was like
I was
crazy
watching
shows
everything,
every
yeah,
night,
yeah.
And really good vibes. And all of a sudden, this happens, and it really kicked us out of the happy routine that we were in, like brutally, you know. And he still played 2 shows.
And getting him in and out of the bandwagon in a wheelchair.
Exactly.
I can only imagine the shit you guys had to do.
Yeah, we did that for a few days. He still played 2 shows in a wheelchair.
Unbelievable.
And well, he had to get home to get surgery.
Yeah.
We actually went to a hospital in LA, and the quote was like $130,000.
No, thank you. No.
And his Swiss health insurance eventually sent 2 nurses over to pick him up and take him home to Switzerland.
Really?
And he got his surgery there, and we were alone all of a sudden. And the first show, I remember, the first show alone was in Portland. It totally sucked.
Yeah.
We tried to come up with something that made sense, and it didn't. And I was very angry that night because we do release all of our records as parallel as instrumental versions, so there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing that. But it's something, when you just mute the vocals, it's not the same. You need to rehearse for that. You need to prepare a set list of like the more atmospheric tracks maybe that can work well instrumentally, and we weren't prepared for that, so we had to adapt to it, and it took a couple of shows, and then we found a way somehow. And then surprisingly, the second half of the tour was actually really good. I think we learned a lot from that because of the fact that Loic was taken away from us. We learned to engage the crowd in different ways and to interact in different ways, like the rest of us, Matthias, David, Paul, and me. And that's something we still do and that we've taken out of this experience.
So you've like leveled up because of the experience, which is amazing. Exactly.
And we used to just be in our private little capsula, and then we had to be frontman.
Yeah.
We all had to entertain. That's what it is in the end, you know, and like to just communicate with the...
That first night must have sucked.
Yeah.
Because there's a routine on tour. There's a routine on stage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're relying on your bandmates to do certain things.
Everyone has
a job. Exactly. Everyone has a job and a role, you know. And take out someone as important as the lead singer, it leaves you in a difficult situation. And it was like that, but like I said, we took like 5-6 shows to adapt, I think. And then the Chicago show, for example, was one of the best shows of the tour, I think, for us. We sold more merch that night than any other night, and it was a show without Loic. Don't tell him that. No, but of course, like we missed him dearly, and the crowd missed him. But I think everyone understood that it was a special situation, and people generally appreciated that we didn't just abort the tour.
Yeah.
Which
a lot of bands would have. A lot of bands might have and would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we couldn't do that. We had our flights booked, and
the bandwagon was reserved.
The bandwagon was reserved. We had that was not an option to just cancel the tour.
You had the merch printed. On to something that I think is I love the Ocean. I'm a huge fan, but I think I'm more of a fan of you because of Pelagic Records. Because you have a roster of so many bands. And like setting up for the first interview that we did, I was looking at the roster and going, oh my God, I like this band. Oh my God, I like this band. I like this band. I like this band. And it's all your roster. So just to name a few, like Herod, Mono, LLNN, Ancestors, Guys and Astronaut, F, there's more. But I have to commend you. So why did you start a label? What was the importance of having a label for you? Let's start with that.
Pelagic was started in 2009 because I wanted to repress an old Ocean record, Fluxion. Yeah. And we were signed with Metal Blade at that point. And so I asked them if they want to do it, and they didn't want to do it at that time. And Andreas from the German office told me, why don't you do it yourself? And I was thinking, maybe I could do that. And then he hooked me up with a couple of distribution contacts. And I managed to score a deal with SPV back then. Like a German label. It was a German distributor that was serving all of Europe. That doesn't exist anymore, really. Okay. But that was a good deal. And so I repressed that record, and it went well. And then I did a second record by a small Swiss band called Nebra. That is a super awesome album, but is
that because they were friends with you and they were like, well, you just did this, Robin, can you do this for us?
I don't remember how I even discovered them. I think it was recommended to me by some friends in Switzerland at that time, and I listened to that album and I thought it was awesome. I still think it is. And I wanted to release it because now I had a record label, and so I pressed like 1,500 CDs and I still have 1,400 in my basement.
So massive success, first success, and then the second was not a success.
No, it was a disaster. And then on top of that, SPV went into bankruptcy, and I had my CDs, my 2 releases, spread out all across Europe at the different national distributors, and had to arrange for them to be shipped back to Berlin.
Fucking
and like it sucked. It was difficult.
Yeah. So you could have quit, though. There was a moment where you could have quit.
Yes.
Thank God you didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, it was on the edge at that time. But then the third release I did was Goddess and Astronaut. All is Violent, All is Bright, and that sold very well, and was a great album. And with every release, I learned a lot, of course, also. And yeah, back then it was really just a one-man enterprise, me packing parcels in my basement, taking care of all the pre-orders myself. And then it slowly and gradually grew. The next Ocean records I did were the Centric records on vinyl, and Precambrian on vinyl. And
that's because Metal Blade didn't want to do it.
Exactly. They didn't want to do vinyl for a while. There was a crisis that, to be honest, I don't quite understand myself why they didn't want to do it back then. But they didn't, and they licensed it out to small labels. At one point, I just got the license back from those small labels and told them I want to do that myself. And then when we renewed our contract, I made it a condition from the beginning that we keep the vinyl rights, because at that time we had set that up in a way that it worked very well. And so the Ocean and our vinyl releases massively boosted the label and made it possible to try other things. And that's what I did, and then it slowly and gradually grew up until like 2016. I only had one employee, and then in the years after that, 2017, 2018, and then throughout the pandemic, we've grown to a team of 9 now. And especially during the pandemic, the label grew exponentially because people were sitting at home, not being able to go to gigs or festivals, not even being able to spend their money on drinks and going to bars. And they still loved music, and so they wanted to buy vinyl records. And we increased our production by like 800% through the pandemic.
God,
it's
amazing.
Crazy. And so now it's become a full-time job. And Paul, our drummer in the Ocean, works for Pelagic, and we have a team of 7 other people working at home, from packing people to like PR persons. And
shout out to Chris.
Exactly, Chris is the PR guy. James is the logistics guy, and and now also because we started this subscription a couple of years ago, which basically is a monthly flat rate that we let people pay in order to get everything we release on vinyl in a special limited color edition.
Very cool.
That has been very very healthy also because it brings in funds at the beginning of the month.
Yeah.
And it also means that for every release that we make, 300 copies are already sold to our subscribers. So it means we can realize higher print runs. We don't press anything, even of very small releases, less than 1,000 copies anymore, which then makes it cheaper.
You know
per
that a
unit
third
price.
of them are gone right away.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing.
So that has really helped
Very
us
smart.
be able to experiment and also not just always have to keep a very close eye on whether a band already has a lot of profile. There's actually a lot of bands that we released that didn't have much profile before we took them on. This year's Playgrounded is one such example.
So
for example,
good.
super good record.
So like movie soundtrack-esque.
Yeah. It's very heavy and very complex at the same time and also very calm. It's like
I really enjoyed it.
Meshuggah and codeine jamming or something like that. Super good record. Yeah. So things like that we knew would appeal to our crowd that would have been more difficult in the past. Now with this base of monthly subscribers, we can afford to do that, and we know that a lot of records are already going away to these people within our own circles, basically. So that is that's very, very good, and lets us do things that otherwise we couldn't be doing.
You mentioned that, like, you know that your crowd. So what is a Pelagic record crowd? How do you know which bands to present them? What is the sound that defines Pelagic according to you?
It's somewhere between, if you just want to take cheap terms, between post-rock and post-metal, but it is also a lot more than that. We've done some quite krauty releases last year, like Oslo Tapes, for example, or a Finnish band called Horte. But the essence of it is heavy, experimental heavy music. Can be instrumental and can be on the pretty post-rock side of things and can be crushingly heavy like LLNN, for example. So it's a quite wide range, and I do believe that our audience is somehow split. There's definitely the people that buy all of our post-rock records. They will buy Mono and PG Lost and God is an Astronaut, and they don't like the very heavy stuff. And there's also the heavy crowd that doesn't get so much out of the post-rock thing. But altogether, I mean, the fact that we have these subscribers kind of proves that there's enough people that like the whole scope of it, you know, and also the fact that there are maybe sometimes surprises that fit within the general Pelagic aesthetics, but they're also a little bit outside of the box, like I just said, Horte or Oslo Tapes, for example. But yeah, of course, people have preferences, you know, and I can't really say what it is that unites all these bands or the red thread that is going through. I do think that the Pelagic sound is best defined by its bands, you know, and the axis that goes from a band like Mono to a band like LLNN. Very disparate ends of the spectrum, but both bands are heavy in their own way.
I would definitely love to see them collaborate in some weird way. I think they would work.
Yeah, I can imagine that, yeah. LLNN just did a collaboration with The Devil's Trade.
Okay.
Signed with Season of Mist. It's a Hungarian singer-songwriter.
Really?
With an amazing voice, and that is a good example of that. And they did a collaboration record, which they premiered at Roadburn this year.
Amazing.
And we're going to release it next year.
I can't wait to hear that.
That is a good example of something that sounds very odd, like a singer-songwriter with a folk context meeting a super heavy, sludgy Danish metal band, but it works very, very well.
I think it's so fucking cool. So fucking cool. How do you feel if ever, like, you've built a band, you find this band, you love this band, you cater this band, it grows, and then it leaves the nest and it goes to a bigger label? How do you feel when babies leave the nest? If it's happened.
Probably like a mother whose child is turning 18 and leaving the house.
Are you proud of them, or do you want them to stay?
Both.
Because if they're leaving, it's because on your side you can't give them what they want anymore.
I have to think first if that even really ever happened.
I feel like last time you told me it didn't. I feel like
I'm trying to think of something, but I mean, Mono are a good example. We started working with them in 2014, we released 4 records. The contract expired, and we signed a new contract because they were happy with what we do. And for me, they're one of the most amazing and inspirational bands ever. So working with them is a great honor and a great pleasure. And I think this is how it has to be. You know, both sides have to be happy. But sometimes also other things come into play, and I understand if Nuclear Blast come around and propose to one of our bands and a deal that is hard to just say no to, then I understand, of course, if a band wants to go that route. Although it probably means that they won't see nearly the same royalties from the deal as we're offering, but that's on a different page. But if that happens, I look at it with common sense, and we're not here to restrict anyone, but obviously as a small record label, you're investing a lot of time and money and energy into building an artist, and if then a bigger label comes around and just takes that artist and all the work you have put into it, that would be wrong. And that's exactly why we don't do one album deals. I don't know any indie label that would do that.
It's a building.
Yes, we want to build long-term relationships with our artists. That doesn't mean like until the rest of their lives, but it does mean that we don't do anything less than 3 album deals.
Really? Okay.
Simply because because of what I just said. Like we put in a lot of effort, time, and money, and we want to prevent that situation that then with the next record someone else comes and just praise on what we've
all the
put
work
into
you've
this.
Done,
Yeah, exactly.
How do you feel? What would be your advice, or what would you say to someone that wants to start a label now? Is it still meaningful to have labels in this world with everything that's going on with the independent scene? If you could fast forward to now with everything you've done, would you still start Pelagic?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I'm not sure. I do think there is still a need for independent record labels. Absolutely. We do a lot of things that in theory the bands could do themselves, but in practice it just won't work.
They don't do it.
They don't do it, and even if they're very much like standing on their own feet and are very proactive, we just have certain assets that have taken years to build. Like our distribution network, I believe, is one of the best independent distribution networks you can have in Europe on the physical side of the market. And you don't just go to these distributors with a new label and say, give me a deal. They won't, because they don't want to do accounting for a new label. And I was struggling with this for years. So what we have to offer now on the retail end is something that is the result of years of work. And that's why a label is handy for small unknown bands, because they can be sure that their vinyl records are out in stores, in the right stores across the globe. Not just the same that I just said for Europe is also true for North America, I believe. And so yes, labels are very useful, but that said, there's a lot of things that bands can do themselves, and it also depends a little bit on what type of music and what type of scene it is. We are heavily focused on vinyl. There are some bands that are very strong digitally, but they basically sell no physical records. So then it's a lot easier, obviously, to get access to that DSP engine and just secure a digital distribution contract, and you can hire your own PR or do it yourself, and book shows yourself. It all depends also on how active you are and how much DIY ethics you have. We actually love to work with bands that have a lot of these DIY ethics. It's where I personally come from. And the most successful PR campaigns are the ones where the band actually provides like all of the content.
Absolutely.
And it's quality content.
Absolutely.
And we make sure we get it out to the right audience and invest into marketing to make it seen. But that doesn't replace the content, and we don't produce content for bands. We don't make their videos for social media or their music videos. That's all in the end something that the bands have to do themselves. So I would suggest for a band, focus your efforts on that and still get a label to help you with reaching the right crowd.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. More spicy question. You sort of mentioned it last time we had a chat. I'm imagining this is what the future's bringing for the Ocean. A long-standing relationship with Metal Blade Records. They're known for building many bands' careers. You have your own very amazing home where you've been re-releasing all the vinyls. At what point are you going to step away from Metal Blade and put the Ocean just on Pelagic?
Well, that point lies in the past already.
Amazing.
We have a new record finished and recorded that is going to be released through Pelagic alone.
Amazing.
Worldwide. It was just mastered before we started with this tour. The artwork is done, and we're looking at releasing in May 2023.
Fucking right.
And there's a second record that I also wrote throughout the pandemic, but we haven't started recording it yet. So the next two Ocean records will be released through Pelagic only. And this is just at this point, a necessary step of emancipation. I really appreciate the good relationship we've had with Metal Blade throughout the years. We went through 3 or 4 album contracts with them, and they have really helped to build the band, especially in North America, but also in Europe. And without them, we probably wouldn't be where we are right now. So I'm very thankful to them. But I also think that we are now in a position where we can do things at least as good, if not better, ourselves, while keeping a much larger share of the income than with them on board. And that's why we decided, mutually decided to part ways and to do it through Pelagic only.
I think it's great news. Metal Blade are one of the best in the world, but it's your label, and you've built it to this. Why not just have it in your house?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly where we are right now.
But you had to go through all the contracts to get there, so cheers to you for doing that.
Yes.
Putting all the effort in, the years and years of hustling, the tumultuous beginnings of Pelagic, with failures, things collapsing, to a massive success, and now you have your band on your own label. It's fucking awesome. Yeah,
I'm very thankful and very happy that things took these turns. But like I said, it's the end result of years of touring. The band has been around for 22 years almost, and we've released 10 or 11 records, so it's been a long way, and now we've come to this point, and we're all very excited about that.
So cool. I love collabs. I forgot to bring you my brand new beer collab. I'll be honest. I had to leave early to go to work before coming here with you today. If not, I would have brought you my brand new beer collab. But I love making collabs. I love making things with Vox&Hops logo on. I love making things with Cryptopsy's logo. If you could make a collab for yourself, for the Ocean, what would that be? It doesn't have to be a beer. What would be the perfect The Ocean collab?
Well, we already have something like that. I'm not sure I told you about this the last time already, but we've made our own coffee.
Yes.
It's also a pandemic-born project. Basically, we started making band coffees through Pelagic, where me and my good old friend Angelo, a coffee roaster, were sitting down listening to music and trying to describe that music with words.
Awesome.
And then realizing that a lot of times the same words that you use to describe music, you can also use to describe coffee.
Yeah.
And so we came up with the idea to make coffee that reflects a band's sound, basically. And we made a coffee for the Ocean, for Mono, for Goddess and Astronaut, and for Envy from Japan. And the Ocean coffee is a stormy wake-up call in the morning. It's very Robusta based, very very heavy, and the Mono coffee is very elegant and elegiac and has this long lingering taste on the palate. So like they're very different, as different as coffee can be, basically.
So cool.
And so this was the project we did in this direction. I wouldn't be opposed to doing an Ocean wine either. I believe we're more wine drinkers than beer drinkers. Especially Peter is a huge red wine cognoscenti, and I think an Ocean wine would be something really nice. And there's actually an Italian winemaker that made one already. He asked us for permission to use a song title for his wine, Eocene it's called, and he sent us a couple of bottles, and it's good, but it's not exactly what I would like. So I think there's more that can be done in this direction. And if we release an Ocean wine, we really want to stand 100% behind it, like we do with the coffee, and we haven't found the right partner for this yet. So I think this would be the next project probably.
Very, very cool. Coffee is easier to ship.
Exactly.
And much more legal to ship than wine, though.
Yes.
One last question. Classic Vox and Hops, a wrap-up question. It probably doesn't happen to you very often because you just told me before that the last time you puked was on your 14th birthday. But every once in a while, it happens to everyone. What is your hangover cure?
Drinking lots of water before you go to bed. That's the point. Like, I go to party a lot in Berlin. And, okay, let's not talk too much about that, but it's important to find the right point when you stop drinking or taking drugs or whatever it is that you're doing, and then to just drink water for about an hour and a half before you go to bed, and you'll feel amazing the next day. It really makes a huge difference. So when I go to parties, I stop drinking and doing anything for at least an hour. I'm still out and
you're still
just
out
drinking like 2 liters of water.
With people.
Exactly, interacting because by that time I will be drunk anyways. So there's no need to drink more, and then to just rinse your body with 2 liters of water. That really helps.
Amazing. Robin, thank you so much for hanging with me, talking about your life, talking about music, talking about craft beer. I had a blast. Everyone get ready for that brand new The Ocean Collective record that's coming out in May of 2023. I'm stoked for it. Go subscribe to the Pelagic subscription thing because it's fucking awesome. Robin, massive cheers to you. This was amazing.
Hail the Boréale. This was a really nice beer.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right today. You know that I love and appreciate that. Man, this was an awesome conversation. I am completely enamored with Pelagic Records. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I really, really like that label. And to sit down and have a chat with Robin and get into the mindset of someone that curates a label that I love so much was a treat. I hope you understand that. We had a great chat. It was awesome to connect with him face to face. We had a call before. Sadly, that episode never came to life, but it gave us a chance to have a chat again, face to face, and it was amazing. So stoked. Massive cheers to Robin, and I cannot wait to hear what that brand new The Ocean album that Robin was talking about. It's going to be massive. Massive cheers to Robin. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with me. Now, if you enjoyed this Vox and Hops episode, you should sign up to the Vox and Hops Brewtal Podcast's mailing list. You can do it on my website, voxandhops.com. That's VOXANDHOPS.com. And when you do that, you shall receive 1 email a month that will contain all of the details of everything that has happened in the world of the Vox and Hops Brewtal Podcast. You get to see which episodes I dropped recently. You will get to see which episodes I have coming up. You will get to see which albums the Vox and Hops album review crew have reviewed recently. You will also get to see which albums Jerry Monk, Vox and Hops' Metal Architect, has added to the Brutal Awakenings playlist. And you will also get to hear about any projects I have in the works before I announce them to the public. There is always a lot of things going on in the world of Vox and Hops, and I hate when you miss anything, so please do me a favor and sign up to the mailing list. The Vox and Hops Brewtal Podcast is brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts. I hope you have a killer rest of the week. I will be back next week with 2 episodes, one on Tuesday and another on Friday. But until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.